Did you see her? She always hides her face. The whisper echoed down the sleek marble hallway of Cole Enterprises, the largest tech company in the city. Employees sat at their desks pretending to work, but their eyes followed the elegant woman walking to the corridor. She wore a long beige coat, matching heels, and carried herself with an air of quiet dignity. But what drew all the attention wasn't her outfit. It was a plain, smooth white mask that covered her face. Some people pretended not to notice, but others stared openly. Whispers rose as soon as she passed. "That's the CEO's wife, right?" One junior employee whispered to another. "Yeah, nobody's ever seen her face. Isn't that weird?" "Super weird. I heard she must have some horrible scars." "No, I heard she's just really ugly. Like, so ugly Adrian hides her face, so people don't laugh at him." The gossip spread like wildfire every time she came to visit her husband at the office. People came up with wilder and wilder stories about why she wore that mask. Some said she had been in a terrible accident and didn't want to show her burns. Others claimed she had some rare disease that made her appearance frightening. A few went so far as to say she was disfigured from birth, and Adrian only married her out of pity. No one really knew the truth, but that didn't stop them from talking. A mysterious couple. Adrian Cole, the CEO, was a complete opposite of his wife when it came to attention. He was tall, handsome, and charismatic, always in the news for his brilliant innovations and bold business moves. He had turned his small startup into a billion-dollar empire before he even turned 35. People admired him, feared him, and even envied him. So when news broke years ago that Adrian had secretly gotten married, the entire city was buzzing. Reporters searched for wedding photos, curious about what kind of woman had captured the heart of such a powerful man. But there were no photos, no public wedding, no social media posts. Just one shocking press conference where Adrian appeared in a suit, holding hands with a woman wearing a mask. "This is my wife," he said simply. "Her privacy is important to me. Please respect it." That was it. No explanation. No drama. No answers to questions reporters were dying to ask. As months passed, curiosity turned into obsession. People on the internet debated for hours about what she must look like under the mask. Some made cruel memes and jokes, calling her the Phantom Bride or Mrs. Mystery. Employees at the company weren't much better. Whenever she visited, they would stare, whisper, and sometimes even laugh quietly behind her back. "I don't get it," one employee said to another. "Adrian is rich, powerful, and could have married a model or actress. Why would he pick that?" "That's what I'm saying," another replied. "It doesn't make sense unless she's got some hold on him. Maybe she knows a secret about him. Or maybe she's just loaded and funded his company." The rumors got crueler as time went on, each one more far-fetched than the last. People forgot that behind the mask was a real human being, someone who could hear, feel, and be hurt by their words. What made the situation even more intriguing was that Adrian's wife never reacted. No matter how much gossip swirled around her, no matter how many curious glances she got, she always remained calm and graceful. She never snapped at anyone, never tried to defend herself, never explained why she wore the mask. In fact, when people accidentally bumped into her or made awkward comments, she would just smile softly behind the mask and say, "It's all right." Her silence only made people more desperate to figure her out. Some said she was arrogant, that she thought she was too good to speak to ordinary people. Others said she was shy and had no social skills. But the truth was much deeper than anyone imagined. Adrian never encouraged the gossip. If anything, he made it clear he wouldn't tolerate disrespect. One afternoon, an employee made a snide joke about his wife within earshot of Adrian during a meeting. The CEO's face darkened, and his voice went cold. "You are free to gossip about me all you want," Adrian said, staring straight at the man. "But if I ever hear you disrespect my wife again, you'll be out of this company before you can finish your sentence." The room went silent. The employee turned pale. And true to his word, Adrian had him transferred out of the department the very next day. This incident became office legend, but instead of stopping gossip, it fueled it even more. People said Adrian was too sensitive about the topic, which must mean there was really something to hide. Months turned into years, but the mystery of the masked wife never faded. Every time she appeared in public, whether a charity event, a product launch, or even just having lunch with Adrian, cameras would try to catch a glimpse of her face. Photographers offered large sums of money for any picture of her without the mask, but no one ever succeeded. Somehow, she always managed to keep her face hidden, and that made her even more fascinating. Behind closed door, however, Adrian's wife felt the weight of all those stares and whispers. She never complained to her husband, never asked him to defend her, but she knew what people were saying. Some nights, she would sit quietly by the window, holding the mask in her hands, thinking about how quickly people judged what they didn't understand. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She just wondered how different people would act if they knew the truth, if they knew the real reason she wore the mask. And soon, they were about to find out. The city buzzed with excitement when Adrian Cole made his announcement. It was the company's 10th anniversary, and he was hosting a grand gala, a night of music, fine dining, and celebration at the most prestigious hotel ballroom in the city. Invitations were printed on thick gold-edged cards, and each one was personally signed by Adrian himself. Only the most important people got one. Top investors, powerful business partners, celebrities, media personalities, everyone wanted to be there. This wasn't just another company event. It was going to be the event of the season. But what really got everyone talking was the possibility that Adrian's mysterious wife would attend. Every news channel had one question. Would she finally appear? She has to. One gossip show host said excitedly on TV, "This is the biggest night of Adrian's career. There's no way his wife wouldn't be by his side. And if she comes," another host added, "maybe we'll finally get a glimpse under that mask." Imagine the photos. Imagine the headlines. Speculation ran wild online. Social media exploded with posts. What if Adrian's wife finally reveals her face tonight? I bet she won't even show up. Guys, mark my words. She's actually super beautiful. She's just hiding it to make a statement. No one knew what was true, but everyone had an opinion. The ballroom staff worked day and night to prepare for the gala. Crystal chandeliers were polished until they sparkled like diamonds. Tables were dressed in silk tablecloths with gold trim. Thousands of white roses were arranged in tall vases, filling the air with a soft fragrance. The catering team brought in world-class chefs to create a 5-course meal. The menu alone became a trending topic online. Lobster bisque, seared duck breast, truffle pasta, champagne sorbet. This was not just a party. This was a statement of power. Adrian was showing the world how far he had come, and everyone wanted to witness it. Among the invited guests, there was one shared thought. Would the mask still be there? Some secretly hoped it wouldn't. They wanted the mystery to end once and for all. They wanted to finally prove that the rumors were true, whether she was truly ugly, as some cruelly said, or she was hiding something else entirely. Others just wanted to see her humiliated. They planned to take photos if anything went wrong, if she tripped, if she accidentally removed the mask, if she looked less than perfect. And then there were those who were genuinely curious, who had always respected her choice to stay private. But even they couldn't deny that they were eager to see the truth. When the night finally came, the hotel looked like a scene out of a movie. Red carpets were rolled out from the entrance to the ballroom. Photographers lined up outside, cameras flashing as expensive cars pulled up one after another. Women stepped out of limousines in glittering gowns. Men wore perfectly tailored tuxedos. The air was filled with the sound of chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses. Inside the ballroom, an orchestra played softly as guests mingled. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone was smiling, laughing, networking, but deep down, everyone was waiting for the same thing. When Adrian finally arrived, the room fell silent for a moment. He walked in looking every bit the powerful CEO, tall, confident, his black suit perfectly fitted, his presence commanding attention. But the silence didn't last long, because just a second later, she walked in, Adrian's wife. She was wearing a floor-length black satin gown that shimmered under the lights. A diamond necklace sparkled around her neck. And yes, the white mask was still there, perfectly in place, covering her face. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers started immediately. She still has it on. I knew she wouldn't take it off. Wow, even at an event like this. Phones discreetly came out as guests tried to snap photos without being noticed. Groups of women standing in a corner began whispering and giggling. "Look at her," one of them said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She thinks she's mysterious, but she just looks ridiculous." "I bet Adrian begged her to come," another replied. "She probably didn't even want to be here. Can you imagine walking around like that in public?" A group of men standing near the bar joined in. "She must be hiding something really bad," one said, chuckling. "Yeah, I almost feel sorry for Adrian. With all his money, this is who he ended up with." The laughter that followed was cruel, and loud enough for Adrian's wife to hear. But she didn't flinch. She kept her head held high, walking gracefully as Adrian guided her to the main table at the center of the room. As the night went on, the whispers didn't stop. Even while music played and glasses clinked, people's eyes kept darting toward Adrian's wife. Some of the braver guests even approached her, trying to be polite, but failing to hide their curiosity. "You look very unique," one woman said with a fake smile. "I've never seen anyone commit to wearing a mask this long," another joked. Adrian's wife just smiled softly behind the mask. She didn't answer, didn't get angry, didn't defend herself. Her calmness was so disarming that it left the guests even more unsettled. When dinner was served, the conversations became even bolder. People kept sneaking glances, waiting for a moment when maybe, just maybe, she'd slip and reveal what was underneath. Some of them didn't even bother lowering their voices anymore. "She's such a mystery," one guest said loudly at a nearby table. "It's a shame, really," another added. "All this money, all this beauty around us, and Adrian's wife chooses to look like this." But Adrian's wife still didn't react. If anything, she seemed calmer than ever, as if she knew something the rest of them didn't. As the orchestra played a slow waltz, Adrian leaned over to his wife and whispered something in her ear. She nodded and smiled behind the mask. Then Adrian stood, tapped his glass with a spoon, and the music stopped. The room went completely silent. Every head turned toward the powerful CO as he cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his deep voice filling the room, "thank you for joining us tonight. This company has achieved so much in the past 10 years, and we couldn't have done it without your support." He smiled, then looked at his wife. "But tonight is not just about celebrating business success," Adrian continued. "It's also about revealing the truth about the woman who has stood by my side through everything." The crowd gasped. People exchanged shocked looks. Could this be it? Adrian reached for his wife's hand and gently guided her to stand. The spotlight shone on them, and in that moment, everyone held their breath. The ballroom was silent except for the faint hum of the chandeliers. Adrian's words hung in the air like electricity. Everyone in the room was watching, waiting, their curiosity burning hotter than ever. But even as they waited for what Adrian might do next, the whispering didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. People leaning toward one another, their voices carrying across the room. "She's not actually going to take it off, is she?" One woman murmured to her friend. "She won't," another replied. "She knows what'll happen if she does. This is just a publicity stunt." "I think she's just looking for attention," a man at the back added. "Nobody normal hides behind a mask this long. It's just dramatic." Adrian's wife heard every single word. She stood there with her husband's hand gently holding hers. The spotlight illuminated her black satin gown, making it glisten. Her mask shone white against the glow, standing out in the middle of the sea of curious, judgmental faces. Some guests were leaning forward so much that they were practically falling out of their chairs. Others had pulled out their phones and were already recording. The tension was almost unbearable. At a table near the front, a wealthy woman with too many diamonds on her fingers leaned over to her companion and whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "I bet she's covered in scars. Why else would she keep it on?" Her companion chuckled. "Maybe Adrian didn't marry her for her looks. Maybe she's got family money. That's the only explanation." Another man from the next table laughed under his breath and muttered, "Or maybe she just threatened to sue him if he ever left her." The small group erupted in quiet giggles, trying to cover their mouths as if they were school children gossiping during class. Adrian's wife stood perfectly still. What no one noticed was the way her breathing remained steady, the way her posture never slouched. Behind the mask, her expression was calm, almost serene. For years, she had lived with these whispers, the jokes, the cruel nicknames, the curious stares that turned to judgment the moment she walked away. But tonight, she felt something different. Tonight, she felt ready. Adrian's eyes scanned the room. He saw the smirks, the mocking glances, the phones held up to record his wife like she was some sort of circus act. A storm flickered in his eyes. He was a man used to controlling every room he walked into, but tonight he felt something beyond control, something personal. His jaw clenched, but his wife squeezed his hand gently. It was her way of saying, "Don't get angry for me. I've got this." Suddenly, one of the boldest women in the room, a socialite known for her sharp tongue, stood up and approached the couple with a fake sweet smile. "My dear," she said to Adrian's wife, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you look fascinating tonight, but surely you know how curious we all are. Why keep hiding? Don't you think it's time to just show us? We won't bite." Her friends snickered behind her. Adrian's wife turned to face the woman. For a moment, there was silence as the two locked eyes. Then, very softly, she said, "You'll find out soon enough why I wear it." Her voice was gentle, but there was something in it, something unshakable. The woman froze, startled. For the first time that evening, she didn't have a comeback. She turned and walked back to her table, her face red with embarrassment. The room was buzzing now. Some of the guests giggled nervously. Others started whispering faster, unable to hide their excitement. "She's going to do it. She's really going to take it off. I can't wait to see. Someone keep the camera steady. This is going to be everywhere online by tomorrow." For a moment, the event stopped feeling like a celebration. It felt like a spectacle, a performance with an audience waiting for its grand finale. But Adrian's wife was not afraid. In fact, she looked more confident now than ever before. She took a deep breath and let her eyes slowly sweep across the room, meeting the gazes of those who had mocked her, those who had pitied her, those who had waited for years to see her unveiled. She didn't speak, but her silence was powerful. It was as though she was saying, "You've judged me for so long. Tonight, you'll see just how wrong you were." Adrian's hand tightened slightly on hers, and he looked at her with pride. He had always admired her quiet strength, the way she never let the world's cruelty turn her bitter. And tonight, he realized, she was about to teach everyone in this room a lesson they would never forget. The orchestra was silent. The guests were silent. The cameras were ready. It was almost time. But before Adrian could give a signal for what was about to happen, the laughter started again. Just one last cruel remark from a table near the back. "She's just trying to build up suspense." A man sneered. "Watch. When she finally takes it off, it'll be a disappointment." His words triggered a few chuckles around him. This time, Adrian didn't react with anger. Instead, he smiled faintly, because he knew something they didn't. Adrian turned to face the guests again and raised his glass. "You've all waited long enough," he said calmly, though his words carried the weight of a man used to being obeyed. "Tonight isn't about your curiosity. It's about truth, and it's about respect." He turned to his wife. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. And just like that, the entire room leaned forward as if pulled by an invisible string. The air was heavy, the silence almost deafening. Everyone's hearts were racing. And in that single heartbeat before she moved, Adrian's wife stood there, elegant, calm, powerful. And for the first time in years, she was in complete control of the moment. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the chandeliers overhead. Even the waiters had stopped moving, frozen in place with trays still in their hands. Adrian Cole, the powerful CEO, stood tall at the center of the ballroom. Beside him was his wife, her hand still gently resting in his, her white mask glinting in the spotlight. Every eye was on her. This wasn't just another party anymore. This was a moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment they had been gossiping about for years. But silence, no matter how heavy, can never last in a room full of people desperate for drama. The whisper started again, soft, hurried, like the rustling of dry leaves. She's really going to do it. I can't believe we're finally going to see her face. What if it's worse than we imagined? Some were excited, some were cruel, and some, deep down, were nervous. Because what if they had been wrong all along? Adrian gently led his wife forward toward the center of the dance floor. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a wide circle around them. It felt like the world had shrunk until there was only this, the couple standing in the golden glow, and the sea of strangers waiting to watch. She moved gracefully, her long gown sweeping across the marble floor. The mask was still there, calm and unmoving, hiding every hint of her expression. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have noticed her hands, steady, not trembling, not even once. As she stood in the center of the room, the guests began to show their true faces too. A few of them were leaning forward eagerly, hungry for gossip and ready to post a moment online. Others were smirking, expecting to be entertained. But there were some who suddenly looked uncomfortable, as if realizing they had been too cruel, too judgmental. The weight of their own whispers was starting to sink in. Then came the group who couldn't resist one last attempt at mockery. 3 women, dripping in diamonds and confidence, stepped forward with 4 smiles. They were known in society for their sharp tongues and perfect appearances, the kind of people who love being at the center of attention. One of them tilted her head and said, "Darling, you really know how to make an entrance. The suspense is killing us." Her friends laughed softly, encouraging her. Another added, "You must love the attention, walking around like this all these years. It's very mysterious of you." The third one smirked and said, "But come on, don't keep us waiting any longer. We're all dying to see what's under there." Their words were sweet on the surface, but the sarcasm dripped like venom. Adrian's wife turned to face them fully. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room like a bell. "You're right," she said simply. "The wait has been long enough." Something about the way she said it made the women freeze. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was confidence. The kind that makes bullies stop laughing, because they suddenly realize they are the small ones in the room. She gave them a single nod before turning back to Adrian. Adrian's sharp gaze swept across the ballroom. He didn't raise his voice, but when he spoke, it was with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "For years," he said slowly, "you've all speculated. You've whispered. Some of you have been kind. Many of you have not. Tonight, I won't name names, but I will say this. You're about to learn something about the woman I married, and about yourselves." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people lowered their eyes. The orchestra, sensing the gravity of the moment, stopped playing entirely. The last notes of the violin hung in the air, then disappeared into the silence. The ballroom was now so still it felt sacred. The chandeliers glittered overhead, casting golden light that made the scene look almost magical, like something out of a movie. Even the air felt heavier, charged with tension, anticipation, and a little fear. Adrian turned to his wife again, his expression softening. "Are you ready?" he asked, quietly enough that only she could hear. She nodded, her hand steady in his. But before she moved, she let her eyes sweep over the crowd one more time. She saw the cruel faces, the curious ones, the ashamed ones. She saw people clutching their glasses, people holding up their phones, people leaning so far forward they were practically holding their breath. And she smiled, a small, secret smile behind the mask, because she knew that in a few seconds, everything was about to change. People weren't just watching anymore. They were holding their breath. Even those who had mocked her now felt their hearts racing. They didn't know why they suddenly felt nervous, but they did. The entire atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just gossip anymore. It was about to become a moment that would stay with them forever. Adrian raised his hand, signaling the staff and security to keep everyone back and ensure no cameras came closer. "This moment," he said, "isn't for the headlines. It's not for the tabloids or for the gossip blogs. This is for the people in this room, to see the truth for themselves." The weight of his words silenced even the boldest guests. From the back of the room, a man muttered under his breath, "Watch! It won't even be worth it." Someone next to him elbowed him sharply, but it was too late. Adrian heard it. Instead of reacting with anger, Adrian actually smiled faintly, as though the man had just set the perfect stage for what was about to happen. "You'll see soon enough," Adrian said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet power. And then, at last, Adrian's wife slowly raised her hands to her face. Every camera phone zoomed in. Every eye widened. The mask gleamed under the lights. Her fingers touched its edges. The room was silent, still, frozen in time. And just as her hands moved to lift it, the lights in the room seemed to glow a little brighter. The chandeliers sparkled like they were part of the moment, too. It was as though the entire world had paused to watch. The ballroom had never been this quiet. The waiters stood frozen in the corners. The guests were statues, leaning forward as though their very lives depended on what they were about to see. Adrian Cole stood in the center of it all, his hand gently resting on his wife's back, his presence commanding attention like a conductor before a grand finale. "This moment," he said, his deep voice resonating through the Golden Hall, "is not about gossip. It's not about curiosity. It's about truth and about respect." Every head turned toward him. "For years," Adrian continued, his gaze scanning the entire room, "you have wondered who my wife is. You have whispered about her, judged her, mocked her. Tonight, I let her answer yourself." He turned to his wife, his expression softening. "It's time." For a long moment, Adrian's wife stood completely still. Then, with slow, deliberate grace, she raised both hands to her face. The room collectively inhaled. Her fingers touched the edge of the white mask. The smooth surface reflected the chandelier light like porcelain. Her heartbeat was steady, not frantic, because she wasn't afraid. This wasn't a moment of shame. It was a moment of power. Guests leaned forward. Some held their breath. Others discreetly recorded, trying to capture the moment they could sell to gossip sites later. The entire ballroom had become a theater, and she was a star, though not by choice. She had been judged for years without anyone knowing her. She had been mocked by people who never even heard her speak. And now, she was about to show them who she truly was. Her fingers slid under the mask. For a second, she hesitated. Not because of fear, but to let the moment stretch. Let them feel the weight of what they had done. Let them remember every cruel joke they had whispered. Then, with a soft movement, she lifted the mask away from her face. For one heartbeat, there was silence. Then came the sound, a wave of gasps so loud it echoed off the ballroom walls. She wasn't disfigured. She wasn't scarred. She wasn't ugly. She was breathtaking. Her face, free from the mask, was radiant under the golden light. Her skin flawless, her eyes bright like jewels, her lips curved in a calm, knowing smile. She was not merely beautiful. She was striking, the kind of beauty that made people blink twice, unable to look away. The guests who had mocked her earlier now sat frozen in their seats. Some covered their mouths. Some turned red with embarrassment. And some lowered their eyes, suddenly unable to meet her gaze. Because in that moment, it wasn't just her face they were seeing. It was a reflection of their own judgment staring back at them. She stood there, mask in hand, and finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but carried the strength of someone who had endured years of being misunderstood. "I wore this mask," she said softly, "not because I'm ashamed, but because I want to know who I was to the world when my face wasn't part of the equation." She let her words hang in the air for a moment. Who would treat me with kindness without knowing what I looked like? Who would respect me without seeing me? And tonight, I have my answer. Her gaze swept across the room, landing on the very tables where she had heard the cruelest whispers earlier. "I have heard your words. I have seen the way you stare. I have felt the weight of your judgment." Her voice didn't shake. There was no anger, only quiet strength. "But I am not here to shame you," she continued. "I am here to remind you that beauty is not what makes someone worthy of respect. And neither is a mask an excuse to treat someone as less than human." The room was dead silent. Adrian's chest swelled with pride as he looked at her. This was why he loved her, not just because of her beauty, but because of her courage, her grace, and her ability to turn cruelty into a lesson. "Tonight," Adrian said, stepping beside her, "you have all witnessed something more powerful than any business success I could ever celebrate. You have witnessed what true dignity looks like. Unexpectedly, some guests began to tear up. An older woman near the front reached for her husband's hand, ashamed of the words she had spoken earlier in the evening. A young employee near the back lowered his phone, suddenly realizing that recording this moment felt wrong. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was sacred. Even the socialite women who had mocked her earlier now sat silently, their faces pale. Something shifted in the air. Where there had been laughter, there was now reverence. Where there had been curiosity, there was now admiration. Where there had been cruelty, there was now regret. Adrian's wife had done what no one expected. She had taken their judgment and turned it into a lesson they would never forget. She looked down at the mask in her hands one last time. Then she set it gently on the nearest table. "I won't need this anymore," she said quietly. The statement was simple, but its meaning was powerful, because she had shown the world her face, and now there was nothing left to hide. Finally, after what felt like hours of silence, the room erupted, but not with gossip this time. There was applause, not the polite, shallow kind, but real applause full of admiration and respect. People stood to their feet, clapping, cheering. Some even wiped away tears. Adrian took his wife's hand and raised it proudly, smiling. In that moment, she wasn't just a mysterious CEO's wife anymore. She was a symbol of courage, of strength, of grace under fire. The sound of applause echoed like rolling thunder through the ballroom. But it wasn't the usual applause of a business event. This was different. People clapped slowly at first, as though unsure if they had the right to celebrate after what they had done. Then, one by one, they stood until the entire ballroom was on its feet. Adrian's wife stood in the middle of it all, calm and composed, her mask now resting on the table like a discarded piece of the past. She smiled faintly, not arrogantly, not smugly, but with a quiet sense of relief. It felt as if the entire evening had been turned upside down. A few minutes ago, the ballroom had been buzzing with whispers, speculation, and judgment. Now, there was a kind of reverence in the air. People were no longer looking at her as the strange masked wife. They were looking at her as though seeing her for the very first time. And for many of them, that realization stung. Near the front of the room, a young woman who had laughed earlier now looked pale and shaken. Her hand clutched the stem of her wine glass, but she didn't dare raise it to her lips. Beside her, her friend whispered, "We were so wrong." "I know," the first woman replied, her voice barely audible, "and she knew this whole time. She heard us." "Oh, God!" They exchanged a look, a mixture of shame and regret, and suddenly found it hard to keep eye contact with anyone. When the applause finally quieted down, Adrian stepped forward again, his voice warm but steady. "Tonight," he said, "my wife didn't just remove a mask. She removed every false story you have told about her, every cruel word, every assumption." He looked around the room, making eye contact with several people who quickly glanced away. "And I hope you understand something. It was never the mask that made you judge her. It was what was in your hearts." The words landed heavily. No one could argue. No one dared to. Her grace wins them over. Then, Adrian's wife did something that surprised everyone. She stepped forward and smiled gently at the very people who had mocked her. "You do not owe me an apology," she said softly. "What you owe to yourselves is a promise to never treat another human being as less because of something you don't understand." The statement was so disarming that several people actually teared up. Slowly, hesitantly, some of the guests started to approach her. A middle-aged woman came forward first. I need to say this," she stammered. "I was one of the people who thought you were hiding something terrible. I judged you before I knew you. I am so sorry." Adrian's wife reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you," she said. "That is all I need to hear." Seeing this exchange, others followed. Soon, there was a line of people waiting just to speak to her, to tell her they were wrong, to thank her for teaching them a lesson they didn't even know they needed. Of course, the reporters in the room were snapping photos and scribbling notes as fast as they could. But even they weren't acting like vultures anymore. They were in awe. One reporter even put her pen down, shaking her head. "This isn't just news," she whispered to her colleague. "This is a story people need to hear. This could change how people see each other." Even the glamorous women who had mocked her earlier stood up and approached. One of them, who had been particularly cruel before dinner, swallowed hard before speaking. "I owe you the biggest apology," she said. "I laughed at you because I thought you were strange. But tonight, you have shown me what real elegance is. And it isn't about a dress or a face or a title. It's about strength." Adrian's wife smiled at her too. "And strength," she replied, "is something every one of us has, if we choose to use it with kindness." Throughout all of this, Adrian never let go of his wife's hand. He watched her with pride in his eyes, as though seeing her not just as his wife, but as the powerful woman she had always been. Only now, the world finally saw it too. At one point, he leaned close and whispered, "You were perfect." She smiled softly. "I wasn't perfect," she said. "I was just me." And somehow, that made her even more perfect in his eyes. By the end of the evening, the entire mood of the gala had transformed. What had started as a night of quiet judgment had turned into a night of redemption. Guests mingled not just to network, but to truly connect. Conversations were warmer, more genuine. People spoke to Adrian's wife with admiration and respect. It felt like a celebration, not just of the company, not just of Adrian's success, but of humanity itself. Someone suggested taking a photo of the mask where it lay on the table. "It's a reminder," they said, "that we all wear masks sometimes, and we all deserve the chance to be seen for who we truly are." Adrian's wife allowed it, smiling. The mask was no longer a symbol of secrecy. It was now a symbol of transformation. As the gala drew to a close, guests left with something far more valuable than business deals. They left with a lesson, a reminder, and for many of them, a new perspective on how quickly they judged others. One man was heard telling his wife as they walked out, "I'll never make fun of anyone like that again. She made me see how ugly it made us look." When the ballroom finally emptied, Adrian and his wife stood together, looking around at the now quiet space. "You know," Adrian said, smiling, "I think tonight was the most important night of my entire career." She looked at him with a small, knowing smile. And it wasn't even about business. "No," Adrian agreed. "It was about something much bigger." They walked out hand in hand, leaving the mask behind, as if leaving behind every cruel word, every judgment, every shadow of doubt. And though the ballroom was empty, it still felt full of the lessons she had taught everyone that night. The morning after the gala, the world woke up to headlines that no one had expected. CEO's wife stuns world, mask removed at gala. The mystery woman behind Adrian Cole revealed, and she's gorgeous. The lesson everyone needed to hear about judging others. News outlets replayed the footage of the reveal on a loop. The moment she removed her mask, and the entire room gasped, was shared across every platform: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and even international news networks. What had started as years of cruel speculation had turned into a global conversation overnight. Within hours, clips of the reveal had been viewed millions of times. Hashtags like #MaskReveal, #RealBeauty, and #Mrs. Cole trended worldwide. Some users praised her courage. Some posted side-by-side comparisons of how she looked with a mask and without, marveling at her grace. Others admitted, publicly, that they had once mocked her but now felt ashamed. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. "We all thought she was hiding something ugly. Turns out, what was ugly was how we treated her." Instead of gossip, there were now threads of admiration. "She taught us that you never know someone's story until you hear it from them," one user wrote. Another posted, "This hit me hard. How many people do we judge every day without knowing what they carry? She made me rethink my behavior." The story was no longer about her appearance. It was about her message. The next day, Adrian's wife agreed to do a short live interview for a major network. Sitting on a comfortable chair in their elegant living room, she looked serene, no longer wearing the mask. When asked why she had chosen that moment at the gala to reveal herself, she answered simply, "Because it wasn't about proving my beauty. It was about proving a point. We live in a world that judges too quickly. I wanted to remind people that a mask doesn't define someone. Their character does. The interviewer leaned forward. And do you feel free now that you've removed it? She smiled softly. I felt free the moment I decided I didn't care what people thought. Last night was just me sharing that freedom with the world. Back at Cole Enterprises, the reveal became the only topic of conversation. Employees who had once whispered behind her back now spoke with admiration. One junior employee admitted to his manager, "I feel bad. I was one of the people who made jokes about her. But after hearing what she said last night, I've realized how wrong I was. I don't want to be that person anymore." Even the most skeptical staff members now spoke of her with respect, some even calling her the heart of the company. Requests poured in from museums, asking if they could display her mask as a symbol of resilience and dignity. Fashion designers wanted to create limited edition pieces inspired by her look. But Adrian's wife refused most offers. The mask was never meant to be a brand, she said. It was a reminder, for me and for others, that what's underneath is what matters. If I give it away for profit, I lose the meaning. Still, she allowed one photograph of the mask to be used in an upcoming magazine feature titled, "The Woman Who Taught the World to Look Deeper." Perhaps the most surprising thing was that several people who had been cruel to her in the past went online and publicly apologized. One socialite even posted a video. "Last night, I saw myself in the worst possible light. I had judged a woman I didn't know, and she responded with kindness. She showed me that true beauty isn't about looks but about character. I am going to do better." The video went viral too, sparking a wave of confession from others who had once mocked someone for their appearance. Seeing the global reaction, Adrian's wife realized she had been given something rare, a platform that could truly change lives. She decided to start a campaign called Unmasked, a social initiative encouraging people to share their real stories and embrace who they truly are. Her campaign quickly gained traction, with thousands posting photos and videos of themselves revealing something personal, a scar, a struggle, a secret, and sharing how it shaped them. For many, it became a movement of healing. Adrian stood by her every step of the way. "I always knew you were extraordinary," he told her one night as they sat together on their balcony. "Now the world finally knows it too." She looked at him with gratitude. "You never pressured me to remove the mask," she said. "You let me do it on my terms." "And I'd do it all over again," he replied, "because this was never about what the world thought. It was about what made you feel safe until you were ready to step into the light." Of course, not everyone was kind. Some critics claimed she had worn the mask just for attention or that the reveal was a publicity stunt. But their voices were quickly drowned out by the overwhelming wave of positivity. Most people saw her for who she truly was now, a woman who had endured years of judgment, and turned it into a moment that inspired millions. Within weeks, she was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and talk shows around the world. She didn't speak about beauty or wealth. She spoke about dignity, empathy, and understanding. And every time she spoke, she ended with the same words. Every one of us wears a mask. Fear, insecurity, pride. But the bravest thing we could do is remove it and let the world see us as we are. One evening, as they sat together looking over the city skyline, Adrian turned to her. "You know," he said, smiling, "I think you just changed the world, one mask at a time." She chuckled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I didn't change the world," she said. "I just reminded it how to be human again." The first morning without the mask felt strange, but in the best way. For years, Adrian's wife had woken up and reached instinctively for the mask sitting on her nightstand. It had become part of her routine, part of her identity. But now, the nightstand was empty. She stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath as she stared at her own reflection. There was no barrier between her and the world anymore. No shield, no secret. For the first time, she saw herself the way everyone else now saw her. Open, unhidden, unapologetically herself. And it felt powerful. A few days later, Adrian invited her to join him at a major board meeting. Normally, she would have worn the mask and remained quiet in the corner. But this time, she walked in confidently, her face uncovered, At first, there was a hush in the room. Executives who had only ever seen her in photographs with the mask sat frozen, unable to hide their surprise. Then, one by one, they smiled. "It's so good to see you," one of the board members said warmly. "Really see you," another added. She smiled back, feeling a wave of relief. They weren't staring at her out of curiosity anymore. They were acknowledging her presence with respect. Without the mask, she began to rediscover parts of herself that she had tucked away for years. She started going out more, to cafes, bookstores, museums, not caring if people recognized her. She would chat with strangers and laugh openly, no longer afraid of judgment. Children would smile at her in the park, and she would smile back. For years, the mask had made her seem distant, intimidating even. Now, she felt approachable. It was like stepping into a brighter version of the world, one where she no longer had to hide in the shadows. Adrian noticed the transformation almost immediately. "You're glowing," he said one evening as they prepared dinner together in their kitchen. She laughed. "It's probably just the lighting." "No," Adrian said, putting an arm around her waist. "It's because you're free. I can see it in your eyes." And he was right. The weight she had been carrying for years, the whispers, the gossip, the fear of being misunderstood, had been lifted. Inspired by her own journey, she began mentoring young women who struggled with self-confidence. She hosted small gatherings at the company headquarters, inviting employees and their families to come and share their own struggles, whether it was about appearance, mental health, or personal identity. "You don't have to wear a literal mask to feel like you're hiding," she told them. "Sometimes we hide behind silence, behind fake smiles, behind pretending we're okay. But when we share our truth, we give others permission to do the same." Her words resonated deeply, and soon her gatherings became a regular event. Her initiative, Unmasked, grew larger every week. People from all over the country, and eventually from other countries, began reaching out to share their stories. There were veterans revealing their battle scars with pride. There were survivors of illness embracing their new bodies. There were people coming forward about mental health struggles, finally feeling safe enough to say, "This is me." Adrian's wife personally responded to dozens of letters and emails, each time reminding the sender that their worth was not defined by perfection, but by authenticity. One day, while walking through a local park, she was approached by a young girl who had been following her story online. The girl was shy, clutching a small sketchbook to her chest. "Hi," the girl said softly. "I just wanted to say, you made me brave." She opened the sketchbook to reveal drawings of herself, one with her hair covering her face, looking sad, and another with her hair pulled back, smiling. "I used to hate how I looked because of this scar," the girl said, pointing to a faint mark on her cheek. "But after watching your video, I decided I don't care what people say anymore." Adrian's wife knelt down, tears stinging her eyes. "You are so beautiful," she told the girl, "and the world deserves to see you just like this." It was moments like this that reminded her why she had taken off the mask in the first place. Her relationship with Adrian also deepened in ways she hadn't expected. For years, Adrian had been her protector, the one who shielded her from the outside world. But now, she felt like his equal in a way she never had before. At business dinners, she spoke up more, adding her thoughts and ideas. Adrian didn't just allow it. He encouraged it, proud of the strong, confident woman standing by his side. One evening, after a particularly successful charity event she had organized, Adrian kissed her forehead and said, "You're more than my wife now. You're my partner in everything." And she felt it too. Their love had always been strong, but now it had depth, forged through trial, courage, and mutual respect. Of course, living without the mask also meant facing the public more often. There were still paparazzi, still reporters who tried to spin her story into drama. But now, she handled them with grace. At one press event, a journalist asked, "Do you regret hiding your face for so long?" She smiled. "No," she said simply, "because the time I spent behind the mask taught me who I am. And it taught me patience, strength, and empathy, which I wouldn't trade for anything." The answer silenced the room, and later became one of the most quoted lines from the interview. Months later, She finally decided what to do with a mask that had once been such a big part of her life. Instead of locking it away, she placed it in a glass case in her home, surrounded by photographs from a night of the reveal. When visitors asked about it, she would smile and say, "That's not just a mask. That's a piece of my story." And in a way, it had become more than just a symbol of hiding. It had become a symbol of transformation. By the end of the year, she was living more boldly than she ever had before. She traveled with Adrian to conferences across the world, gave keynote speeches about resilience, and even wrote a book titled Unmasked: My Journey to Living Free. Her story became a source of strength for thousands who had ever felt small, judged, or hidden away. And every time she stood on a stage, she remembered the night of the gala, the night she removed the mask and stepped into her own power. Months had passed since the gala, but Adrian's wife's story was far from fading. In fact, it was just beginning to bloom. The unmasked movement had spread like wildfire. People across continents were sharing their stories, not just online, but in real life. Schools hosted unmasked days, encouraging students to speak openly about their struggles. Companies adopted new training programs inspired by her message, focusing on empathy and inclusivity in the workplace. What began as a single act in a ballroom had turned into a global wave of change. It wasn't long before she received an invitation from one of the largest international organizations to deliver the keynote speech at a summit on human dignity and equality. At first, she hesitated. "I'm not a public figure," she told Adrian. "I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to share a message." Adrian took her hands gently. "And that message is exactly why they want you there," he said. "You're not a politician. You're not a celebrity. You're someone real, and that's what the world needs to hear right now." After a long pause, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's do it." The summit was held in a grand international hall filled with thousands of attendees and broadcast live across the world. When she walked on the stage, there was immediate applause, but this time it wasn't just curiosity or surprise. It was admiration. She stood at the podium, calm and poised, letting the applause settle before she spoke. "When I wore a mask," she began, "people thought it was hiding something shameful. But the truth is, we all wear masks. Some of us wear them on our faces. Others wear them in our hearts." Her voice was clear, her words carrying across the hall. "I wore my mask because I wanted to know who would see me for who I was, not for what I look like. And what I discovered is that too often we judge each other before we truly know each other. We assume, we label, we laugh, and in doing so, we hurt people who may already be hurting." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "So today," she continued, "I challenge you not just to look at the people around you, but to really see them, to listen before you judge, to treat every person you meet as though they have a story you don't know yet, because they do." She paused, letting her words sink in. Taking off the mask was not just about revealing my face. It was about revealing the truth, that dignity is not something we earn by being beautiful, powerful, or popular. It's something we are born with and something we owe each other. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, and then thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The camera zoomed in on her face as she smiled, a mix of pride and humility shining through. Adrian watched in the front row, his heart full. He had always known she was extraordinary, but now the entire world knew it too. Within hours, her speech was trending across social media. Clips of her standing on stage, speaking about dignity and respect, were shared millions of times. Major news outlets praised her as one of the most important voices of the decade. Thought leaders and influencers called her message a necessary wake-up call. Even people who had never followed her story before were moved. "She spoke to me," one commenter wrote. "I didn't even know who she was yesterday, but today I feel like she changed how I see everyone, including myself." Of course, there were critics who tried to twist her words, accusing her of using her beauty to gain sympathy or turning her personal story into a brand. But this time, their voices were drowned out even faster. Thousands of ordinary people jumped to her defense, sharing how her story had personally touched them, inspire them to reconcile with family members, or encourage them to speak their truth. Her message wasn't just a trend. It was a movement with real impact. Shortly after the summit, a renowned museum asked to permanently display her mask in a special exhibit about modern history's most powerful symbols. This time, she agreed. Standing at the exhibit opening, she and Adrian admired the mask sitting in a glass case, illuminated by a soft spotlight. Beneath it was a simple plaque, "The mask that taught the world to see." She felt tears well up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "This isn't just my story anymore," she said quietly. "It belongs to everyone who ever felt hidden, and everyone who ever chose to see someone differently after hearing it." Every day, letters poured in from strangers across the globe. A young man from Brazil wrote, "I was bullied for years for my appearance. After your story, I finally felt proud to show my real face again." A woman from Japan wrote, "I used to avoid going outside because of birthmark. After your speech, I went out for the first time without makeup, and I felt free." Even children wrote to her, sending drawings of themselves with big smiles captioned, "I am unmasked too." Each letter reminded her that her journey had become something far bigger than herself. That night, as she sat with Adrian in their garden under the stars, she reflected on how far they had come. "Sometimes I can't believe this all started because of one simple decision," she said softly. "To take off the mask?" Adrian asked. "No," she said with a gentle smile. "To stop caring what people thought." Adrian squeezed her hand. "And in doing that, you changed what they thought forever." Over the next few months, she continued to travel, speak, and inspire. Everywhere she went, people would come up to her, some crying, some just wanted to shake her hand and say, "Thank you." And every time she would smile and reply, "No, thank you for choosing to see." It amazed her how one choice, one night at a gala, had turned her from a subject of gossip into a global voice for empathy. And though her story was now famous, she knew her journey wasn't about fame at all. It was about reminding the world that every mask eventually comes off, and what we do when it does defines who we are. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and gold. Adrian's wife sat quietly on the balcony of their penthouse, a warm cup of tea in her hands. For a rare moment, there were no cameras, no reporters, no speeches to prepare for. Just her, Adrian, and the gentle hum of the city below. She closed her eyes and let the cool breeze brush her face, the same face the whole world now knew. Months after the global summit, a major magazine named her one of the top 10 most influential women in the world. Her picture, no mask, just her natural, confident smile, graced the cover. The headline read, "The Woman Who Taught the World to See." At first, she was hesitant about the title. "I'm not a hero," she told Adrian. "I just told my story." Adrian smiled and replied, "That's what makes you a hero. You didn't just tell your story. You gave millions permission to tell theirs." A year later, the same charity that hosted the original gala invited her and Adrian as guests of honor. This time, she walked into the ballroom with her head held high, no mask, no fear. As soon as she entered, the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering as she walked across the floor. The memory of that first gala, the whispers, the laughter, the stares, came rushing back. But this time, it was different. This time, there was only admiration. At the end of the night, she was invited to speak. She walked up to the same stage where a year ago, she had removed her mask for the first time. But tonight, she wasn't nervous. "Exactly 1 year ago," she began, her voice calm but powerful, "I stood on this very stage, terrified. I didn't know what would happen when I took off the mask. I didn't know if people would laugh, or judge me, or turn away." She smiled softly. "But I did it anyway. And what happened next changed my life. And I hope changed the world just a little too." She looked around the room, making eye contact with the guests. "People often ask me if I regret hiding behind a mask for so long. The answer is no, because that mask taught me the most important lesson in my life, that what we hide doesn't make us weak. It makes us human." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And when we find the courage to be seen, Really seen, we give others permission to do the same. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Then, to everyone's surprise, she reached into her handbag and pulled out the mask. Gasps filled the room. She held it up, the spotlight glinting off its surface. "This mask is no longer a symbol of hiding," she said. "It is a reminder of the night I chose courage over fear. And tonight, I want to pass that reminder on." She handed the mask to a young woman in the front row, a girl she had mentored who had been bullied for years because of her appearance. "This belongs to you now," she said gently. "May it remind you that you are stronger than you think." Tears streamed down the girl's face as the audience broke into applause. When she stepped off the stage, the entire room was on its feet. It wasn't just applause this time. It was respect, gratitude, love. People who had once mocked her now wanted to shake her hand, take pictures with her, thank her for inspiring them. And Adrian, standing near the back, had tears in his eyes as he watched the woman he loved transform a room again. Later that night, back at home, she and Adrian sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. "Do you ever miss the mask?" Adrian asked softly. She thought for a moment, then shook her head with a small smile. "No," she said, "because the mask did its job. It protected me when I wasn't ready. But now," she took his hand, "now I don't need it. The world sees me and I see myself." Adrian kissed her forehead. "You've always been extraordinary," he said. "The world just needed a chance to catch up." In the months that followed, she continued to work with the unmasked movement, but now she focused on training leaders and teachers around the world to carry on the mission. "It's not about me anymore," she said in an interview. "It's about everyone who ever felt invisible and making sure they are seen." And as more schools, workplaces, and communities embraced the movement, people began to notice real change. Bullying rates dropped in schools that adopted unmasked programs. Companies reported better teamwork and mental health among employees. Slowly, the world really was learning to see. On the anniversary of the first viral video, she posted one final message on social media. "To everyone who has followed my journey, thank you. My story began with a mask, but it ends with this truth. You are enough exactly as you are. Never hide the light that makes you you." Within hours, the post had millions of likes and shares. Years later, long after the mask had been placed in the museum and the movement had spread to every continent, people still remembered her as the woman who chose courage. Whenever someone found the strength to embrace who they truly were, they would say, "I went unmasked today." And somewhere, Adrian's wife would smile, knowing her story had started a chain reaction that could never be undone. The final scene, her walking hand in hand with Adrian through the city, no mask, no fear, the crowd parting around them with smiles and respect. For the first time in her life, she didn't just feel seen, she felt celebrated. And that was the legacy she left behind, a world that learned to see.